We're going to go live. Hello, everybody watching at home. It is August 1st, 2023, and we've got breaking news here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, former president of the United States, has been charged by the grand jury by Jack Smith in the 2020's election case. Pretty big news, am I right? Presidential historian Allan Lichtman here.
It's huge news.
It's huge news. Does it get bigger than this?
It doesn't. You know, I'm on this thread that asks experts to rate events that occur on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 the least significant, 10 the most significant. And guess what I gave this one? A 10. And here's why. Look, the indictment may seem a little bit technical. You know, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy to deny the right to vote. But it all boils down to one basic thing. Donald Trump, as President of the United States, with all the power, prestige, and responsibility of that office, led a conspiracy to destroy, to undermine a democracy that has endured since the 1780s. We have never before seen a president, or really anyone in power, attempt to steal an election and organize a coup against American democracy, presuming that the allegations in the indictment are true. And I've followed this enough to believe they are. Then, unless Trump is held accountable, the future of American democracy is in grave jeopardy. Indeed, the future of democracy all over the world is in jeopardy, because the health of democracies throughout the globe depend upon the leadership of the United States. And if democracy gets shattered here in the U.S., then democracy is in grave peril in every single nation around the world. That's why I say this is the most important indictment in the history of the United States, overshadowing the indictment of the Watergate conspirators, or even the indictments of the alleged atomic bomb spies. It's as significant as you get short of treason.
Right. And actually, the Alex Trifier made a good point. It could get bigger if he's indicted. Then it would be even bigger, correct?
You mean if he's convicted?
What did I say?
He said if he's indicted. He's already indicted.
I meant convicted, and that's also what he said. If he's convicted, it could get bigger, right?
I suppose it would get bigger. That's right. Indictment is the critical first step. We'd have to, expand our rating scale.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
10 plus.
Well, if this is a 10 out of 10.
Maybe I should have given it a 9 just to leave a little room. Maybe you should have given it a 9 just to give it a little bit of room. And, down in Florida, the story is he's got a favorable judge. But here in D.C., he got a judge who's his worst nightmare. A black woman judge, Judge Tanya Chutkan, appointed by Barack Obama, who has handed out some of the toughest sentences to those convicted in the January 6th insurrection. I have a feeling she's going to move this trial very quickly, maybe even to December. This isn't like the national security case where you're dealing with classified documents and confidentiality. It's a very straightforward case. Jack Smith is the anti-Mueller. Remember the Mueller investigation, which everyone had such hopes for? You
don't remember it.
And there's good reason you don't. Mueller wrote this turgid, 400-page, impossible to read, waffling report. Jack Smith did just the opposite. He wrote a hard-hitting, brief indictment statement that tells a simple and compelling story that's going to be very hard to refute, particularly if they don't put Trump on the stand. I don't know what witnesses they would have, but Jack Smith has gotten it down. Sam, you've heard this before, to where the goats can get it.
No, I've never heard that before. Actually, I have never heard that before.
That's a good one, though.
Andrew asked, and you kind of alluded to this already, I just want to piggyback on it. Do you think the indictment will lead to a sentence even before the election?
Absolutely.
Oh, like no questions asked.
No question. Look, I'm not a lawyer, and I understand that everyone's presumed guilty until they're presumed innocent. Little Freudian slip there.
Uh-oh.
Until they're found guilty in a court of law. But I have a right to my opinion, and my opinion is the case against him is incredibly strong. You know, he's blustered about the witch hunt, the weaponization of justice, the interference with an election, the Biden administration out to get him. You know what all that counts for in a court of law, Samuel?
Zip.
He won't even be allowed to make those arguments. He's got to deal with the facts of the case. And, you know, I watched the January 6th hearings. I read the indictment. I don't know what Trump's defense is going to be. I suppose he's going to claim, you know, I really believed the election was stolen from me and I took appropriate action. Irrelevant. First of all, the indictment crushes that point. Everyone who knew anything about the election told him it wasn't stolen, including his incredibly loyal Attorney General William Barr, his head of cybersecurity, his White House counsel, Republican officials in all of the swing states. They all told him the same thing. But you got to understand, with Trump, truth and falsehood have no meaning. All he cares about is what is good for him. And he couldn't care less whether the charges he was making were false. All he cared about was the charges I'm making going to help me keep me in power. So I really don't understand what his defense is going to be, or even what witnesses he's going to be able to put forward, or what documents he's going to be able to put forward, you know, without testifying himself. And we saw what a disaster that was in the Eugene Carroll civil abuse case that she won in less than 3 hours.
Joseph Kolowowski, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Kolowowski says, you predicted it, Dr. Lichtman, before Trump took the oath of office. Is that true? Did you predict that he was going to go be indicted in a criminal case before he took the oath of office?
Before he took the oath of office.
Well, you wrote the case for impeachment, obviously,
yeah,
which you predicted.
Before that,
right.
Even before the election.
No, I know. That's what he's saying.
I predicted Trump would win the election and he would be impeached.
Right.
I did not predict at that time that he would be subject to criminal indictment.
Okay, so Joseph was trying to give you credit, but you don't deserve all of that credit. Is that what you're saying?
I think I deserve a lot for predicting his impeachment before he got elected.
That is pretty good. What about people who are looking at these charges and saying, this is a political witch hunt, this is the Biden administration taking the reins of the DOJ and going after a political opponent? What do you say to that?
Well, I think that argument will resonate with Trump's base. I don't think it resonates beyond Trump's base. And, you know, his base hasn't cracked. It may not crack, but it's 40%. You can't win with 40%. You know, you've heard me say this before. One of my biggest bugaboos is this obsession with polls. You know, I understand the media needs to cover the story every day. And polls are easy. You don't have to get out of bed in the morning to write a story about polls. But polls, you know, 15 months before the election are meaningless. And you get all these journalists saying, oh, you know, despite all this, Trump is still tied with Biden. So what? We haven't even had any of these trials yet. He hasn't been convicted of anything. So where the polls stand, ordinarily 15 months out mean nothing. But with pending trials and possible felony convictions, you can take these polls and do with them what the great philosopher David Hume said you should do with works of superstition: confine them to the flames.
I hear what you're saying. I agree that it won't budge most of America in terms of this argument of this is just Biden weaponizing the DOJ and this is a witch hunt against Trump. But how would you, as a political historian or just as a person, combat that argument with words?
Very simple.
Okay.
Look at the facts of the case. This indictment and the other two indictments did not come about because of the weaponization of justice. Donald Trump, in 77 years of his life, what has he taken responsibility for?
Let me see. Nothing.
Nothing. And obviously, he's not going to take responsibility for this. But these are his own actions. If he had returned the documents, he wouldn't be charged in the national security case. If he didn't pay hush money to the porn star, he wouldn't be charged in the New York case. If he didn't try to overturn the election, he wouldn't be charged in this case. I want to read something. This is a statement by retired Judge Michael Luttig, who was appointed not by a Democrat, but by Republican H.W. Bush, and was considered for the Supreme Court by President George W. Bush. He was a very conservative judge. And this is what he said. There is not an attorney general or special counsel of either party who would not bring charges against the former president for his efforts on January 6th to overturn the 2020 presidential election. He has dared, taunted, provoked, and goaded DOJ to prosecute him for his offenses on and related to January 6 for 2.5 years. The former president has left Jack Smith no choice but to bring charges, lest the former president make a mockery of the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law. Remember, you don't remember because you're a young punk, but I remember, and I know all about it, when the Republicans were impeaching Bill Clinton in 1998 and 1999.
I was alive.
You were alive,
I was
but
alive.
you probably don't remember.
I don't remember it, no.
What were they saying? No one is above the law. You know, Bill Clinton is not above the law and could face the full consequences of his actions. And he wasn't destroying our democracy. He was covering up a personal consensual affair. And they thought that was the crime of the century.
A couple questions about this in chat. Do you think this is going to embolden Republicans in the House to really pursue this Biden impeachment stuff? I know we've talked about it before, and you say no shot, it's got no legs, yada, yada, yada. But with this, they might have to go on the full attack at this point, right?
They might have to. You know, I don't think it's going to get them anywhere. It's going to make them look foolish, but, you know, they haven't cared about looking foolish. You know, for 4 years, they've been going after Hunter Biden, right? And what have they come up with in 4 years? Nothing. In fact, a lot of that investigation of Hunter Biden was undertaken during the Trump administration by his big loyalist Attorney General Bill Barr, and they didn't come up with anything, certainly nothing implicating Joe Biden. It's just going to look like, except to the core supporters who, you know, can't be moved, as a petty act of revenge by Republicans in the House. And I'm not even sure they can muster enough votes for an impeachment. You know, they have a 5-vote majority, and, you know, they can't afford to lose any votes because no Democrats will support it.
What do you say to people who say Trump was using his First Amendment when talking about the election? He has the right, as anybody else, to say what he wants with free will in the United States, and he's protected under the First Amendment.
Absolutely, he has a right to say what he wants. He has a right to even to lie, but that's not what the indictment is all about. The indictment is Trump going beyond that and engaging in illegal actions after the election was decided, not to uphold any principle, to preserve himself in power. It's one thing to do free speech. It's quite another thing to orchestrate slates of fake electors posing as the real electors for Trump in these swing states. It's one thing to exercise your freedom of speech. It's another thing to use your lies to try to pressure officials in the swing states to change the votes, like Trump tried to do in Florida. It's another thing to try to pressure the vice president to unilaterally, unconstitutionally, illegally simply throw the election to Trump. If that was the case, then Trump would have to say Kamala Harris can throw the election to the Biden-Harris ticket no matter what the voters decide. We know that's unconstitutional and illegal.
Her name is Kamala.
Kamala.
Not Kamala.
Kamala.
You don't know that by now?
Kamala.
You're a presidentialist, you don't know the vice president's name? Anyways. So you're saying there's enough tangible action that's in Trump's... There's enough tangible action from Trump that this whole idea of it was just words is bogus, basically.
Completely bogus. It's
Okay.
not just words. And there is a leak. If you leaving us, as I said, Trump doesn't believe anything is true or false. He only cares what works for him. There was a legal way to challenge the election, right? What was that? Going to court.
Right.
And they did that. And they lost every significant case, many of them in front of Republican judges, Republican-appointed judges, including quite a few judges appointed by Donald Trump himself. He couldn't have cared less that his attempt to legally deal with allegations of election fraud completely failed. He then turned to these illegal means.
Andrew Gamble, do you know who that is? Claims he is a former student of yours.
Yes, of course.
He says, what does Trump's indictment mean for the 13 keys particularly? Is there anything that it means for that?
Actually, nothing. It's a surprising answer,
Right,
but
right.
remember, the 13 keys are always counterintuitive. The basics of the 13 keys is that elections are essentially votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. The only key that pertains to the challenger is the challenger charisma key. And I've already said that doesn't count against the Democrats in the White House, Joe Biden, because while Trump appeals to this narrow 40% base, he's not broadly charismatic like a Ronald Reagan or a Teddy Roosevelt. So that key's already turned in Biden's favor, or not turned against him. This doesn't change that at all. So it suggests, based on the keys, despite all this, Trump could still be elected president if he gets the Republican nomination, it sticks, and enough keys turn against the Biden administration. But I will add one caveat here. The keys are based on history. I'm not psychic Gene Dixon with a crystal ball.
You're not?
Well, maybe.
Oh.
I got one hidden back there.
Right.
Maybe if he gets convicted of undermining our democracy, this would be so unprecedented, so extraordinary, that it might fall outside the scope of the keys and really disqualify him. And the Republican National Committee might even remove him from consideration for the nomination if he is a felon convicted of efforts to conspiracy to destroy American democracy.
That was quite a burp.
Yeah.
Interesting, Andrew, one of our current viewers, interesting question from him. So what if Trump is in prison but still wins the nomination? What happens next?
He can run from prison. Eugene Victor Debs, the socialist candidate in 1920, ran from prison and got over 900,000 votes. One of the ironies of history is Debs was actually imprisoned for violating the Espionage Act of 1917. He was in prison in 1920 when he ran. And of course, Trump is being charged in the national security case in Florida for violating the Espionage Act. I hate calling that case the documents case. It's not a documents case. It's a national security case. Trump is in effect being charged with undermining our national security by retaining and carelessly dealing with the classified documents and showing them to persons who had no security clearances.
Right. But gosh, that would be interesting if we were actually watching a presidential election take place and one of them was in prison. I mean, you use the example of Eugene Debs a lot, which is a good example, but he had no chance to win. I mean,
of course
Donald
not,
Trump,
and it was pre-television.
Right, and it was pre-television, and it was pre-Twitter, and it was pre-Instagram, and it was pre-TikTok. It was pre all
Barely
this
had
stuff.
radio in those days.
Right. What can you even picture what that might look like or what that might be like?
I don't believe the Republican National Committee will let him run from jail. I believe they will remove him.
But at what point?
Look, I'm not an expert in internal Republican politics, but I think they have that power.
At what point do they do that? The day the conviction comes down? The day he enters prison?
Certainly, again, I'm speculating about what Republicans might do, and they've constantly surprised me. They thought Clinton covering up a consensual affair was the crime of the century, but Donald Trump undermining our national security, destroying our democracy. Who cares? So, I'm loath to predict what Republicans might do, but I do think if he's convicted of these charges that we heard today that go to the heart of our democracy and affect the future of the country and the world, I find it hard to believe they would let him run as their nominee. But I found lots of things hard to believe.
Now, here's an interesting scenario possibly. What if he does get convicted and then Biden pardons him?
Not going to happen.
Are you sure? How do you know?
I'm pretty sure
Biden
might pardon him after the election. But that's possible.
But hold on.
He's not going to pardon him before the election and undermine his own chances of getting reelected.
But the only way he'll get this monkey off his back in terms of people saying that he's weaponizing the DOJ, he's corrupt, could be just him going, I pardon Trump. He could be confident enough that he's going to win, that he would pardon him before the election, get all this heat off of him that this is a DOJ Biden-led indictment.
That's a great idea, actually. Maybe you should be a political strategist,
Maybe.
But it carries some pretty great risks of enormous backlash. Can you imagine Bernie Sanders, what he would say about something
But
like
Bernie
this?
Sanders isn't running against Biden.
I know, but, the left wing of the Democratic Party, which you need in an election, I think would be outraged by something like that.
Outraged enough to not show up to the polls and vote for Biden over Trump?
Well,
I don't think
know.
so. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to take that risk.
Maybe not, but it doesn't take much to get people not to vote. They barely vote anyway.
That's a fair point. I do agree with that. But Trump is a pretty motivating factor on both sides of the spectrum.
That is absolutely right. We've had big turnouts both times that Trump is running. It's an intriguing idea. Biden is not a big risk taker, though. Let's face it.
That is
true. It would be a pretty
true.
risky move, but it's intriguing. You should meet with the president and discuss it with him.
Biden, you got my number. Just hit me up.
Just ring him up.
Just ring me up. Actually, Bienvenida Garnett says, if Biden pardons, he loses my vote. So I guess there's already people in the chat saying
you'd have a big backlash.
There's already people in the chat saying Biden would lose his vote if he did that.
It's pretty risky, Strat. I don't think he's going to do it. In fact, I'm 99% sure he's not going to do it.
It's pretty risky. I don't think he's going to do it, but at this point, like you said, who knows what's going to happen? We've never seen anything like this, especially if Trump ends up
Biden is fairly
convicted.
predictable, unlike Trump.
Biden is fairly predictable. That's true.
He's not a risk taker.
He's not a risk taker. That's true. Let's see. President Nieto, we've got a president in the chat apparently, asked, what incentive would the RNC
for him to get on the ballot? Unless he, got on as the nominee of a party like the Green or Libertarians that have some ballot spots. But say they remove him early in 2024, it'd be tough for him to get on the ballot, particularly since he's incompetent and lazy. It'd take a lot of work and a lot of competence to run as a third party that late. But it's possible, and that would destroy the Republicans. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He's not a Republican. He's a Trumpist.
People are saying also that Biden has said already that he's not going to pardon Trump.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's, yeah. But, politicians say one thing and then do another all the time, don't they?
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah, it seems that people are not very big fans of my
No,
idea.
I'm not a big fan of that.
All right, look, if you guys don't like it, you don't like it, okay? I just threw it out there, right? We're just talking about things. We don't know what's going to happen.
It was an intriguing idea, but maybe your career as Biden's advisor is short-lived.
Okay, well, I guess don't call me then, Biden. Nobody likes my ideas, so
yeah.
No need to call me, right? President Belichick, a recurring viewer, is in the chat. He says, I'm the president. So there's a presidential war happening in our chat between President Nieto and President Belichick right now.
Wow. Is that more important than the one between Biden and Trump?
Arguably.
Arguably, yeah. Wow. I'm impressed.
So, obviously, this is big news. There's some co-conspirators. I think we already know now that Rudy Giuliani is one of them.
He's the biggest name among the co-conspirators. The others are not well known. John Eastman.
Right.
Sidney Powell. Jeffrey Clark, some guy. I didn't know exactly who it was. Maybe Cheesebro, another one of the lawyers.
Right. So you don't think the co-conspirator thing is really much
It
news?
is because of Giuliani.
Okay. Expand upon that.
I mean, aside from Trump, Giuliani is probably the best known figure in the Trump circle.
Right, but does that mean anything for, our country? Does that mean anything?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, it shows, again, as we know, you deal with Trump, you're going to get burned.
Yeah.
And Trump doesn't care whether you get burned. He'll throw gasoline in the fire if he thinks it will help him. Secondly, by putting the pressure of indictment on these people, the special counsel may be working to get them to flip and be witnesses against Trump. And that would be very significant because they were all intimately involved in the conspiracy to overturn the election. And again, let me stress, Trump and these co-conspirators were not doing this to uphold some conservative principle or principle of any kind. The sole motive behind this was to keep Donald Trump in power, nothing more, nothing less.
There's a little bit of a debate happening in the chat by a point raised by Captain M90s that says,
wait a minute, we have presidents and captains.
Whoa,
Wow.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Presidents and captains. I wonder what he's captain of. A ship?
Could be.
They say Judge Eileen Cannon has the power to dismiss the entire case and the DOJ cannot appeal. Do you think in case Cannon acquitted Trump... Wait. Okay, I can't read this.
I get it.
You get it, right?
Yeah, the idea is Judge Cannon can, in fact, dismiss the case.
Some people are saying that she can't. Some people are
Well,
saying she can.
She can dismiss it, but that's appealable.
Okay.
But what she can, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't hold me to this. But in any criminal case, after the prosecution rests, the defense can move for a directed verdict from the judge, where the judge rules the prosecution's case is so weak, no reasonable juror would find this person guilty. I don't believe that's appealable.
Right.
And that's incredibly rare. It almost never happens. And from what we've seen of the indictment, the case is in fact incredibly strong, not weak. And I can't imagine Judge Cannon would do that.
What do you think this trial is going to turn out to look like? I mean, it could shake our country to the core of the trial alone. I mean, you know what I'm saying, in terms of just the coverage of it, both sides going crazy about it. I mean, it could really go crazy, no?
No. Let's not
Okay.
forget, most of the cases, at least two of the three so far, two most serious, are in federal court. And there's no television in federal court. That's going to make a huge difference. Now,
I
I'm
agree.
sure the media will petition, for an exception to and I hope they win that. But as of now, there's no television, which is going to make a huge difference. And as I said, Trump will bluster, but his arguments are getting old. They're pulled out of a can. No matter what happens, he makes, it's a witch hunt, it's weaponization, I did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
It's getting old. It's not, inspirational anymore. And the Democrats have been very disciplined in pretty much zipping their lips. Not entirely. The Biden administration has entirely zipped their lips. And even, other Democrats, have not been real anxious to demagogue on this, and very smartly. As Napoleon once said, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
Right. But even without it being televised, I think it's gonna. I mean, have we ever seen a former president go to trial like this before? Never, right? So it's like, I definitely agree. If it would be televised, it would be. I mean, that would be crazy. But I think it's gonna. I don't know. It's gonna be wild. I think possibly.
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
Let me just give you a piece of evidence.
Sure.
Trump called upon his supporters to come out and demonstrate and protest when he got indicted in New York. Remember that?
Yes.
And nobody showed. What happens if we give a protest and no one is there? And he's called for protests in Florida, and there was, a bigger showing, but not much. There hasn't
this
been
has
much
so
of
much
a reaction.
But this has so much more gravity to it than those cases, no?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about...
But again,
Okay.
if he can't summon virtually anyone for the other cases, it's hard to believe there's going to be some kind of large-scale insurrection. They'd like you to
Right.
believe that. You know, they want you to believe that. They've been pushing that.
Because they want to scare you or what?
They want to scare you. Absolutely.
I
They
mean-
want to frighten you.
I think at this point, Republicans are really going to go on the offensive. But I don't know. Like
As
you
I
said...
said, Trump can huff and he can
Yeah.
puff, but he can't blow the courthouse down. None of the things that he's saying or his allies are saying, as you say, their weight in court is zero. Not 0.1, zero. They won't even be allowed to make those arguments in court.
Here's an interesting possibility. Joshua D. says, huge fan of yours.
Oh, always nice to have fans.
What if Trump is in prison, they keep him as the nominee, and he wins?
God. If it's a federal prison, he can pardon himself and get out.
Right.
If it's a state prison, he can't.
Well, these are federal charges, no?
Well, there's the New York State charge.
Right.
He could be imprisoned for that. And
Right.
there's possibly a state charge in Georgia for which he can be imprisoned. But I would imagine,
Okay.
even if he's in prison for state charges, if he wins the election, the state governors, you know, it's a Republican in Georgia, a Democrat in New York. I think the state governors would pardon him.
Which one's coming first, do you think? Which one's the most likely for him to be?
I think the DOJ case on
Right.
this big one, you know, the one that matters most is going to come first for a couple of reasons. It's federal court.
Yeah.
It's not involving classified documents, confidential sources, or anything like that.
Right.
The facts are pretty well known. The facts really aren't in great and grave dispute. We've known most of them ever since a year ago in the January 6th committee. Thirdly, he has this, you know, African-American woman judge appointed by Obama who's a no-nonsense judge, who's been very hard on the January 6th defendants so far. And, you know, again, I don't know her. I'm speculating. I think she's going to set a speedy trial, maybe even the end of this year.
Wow, that would be a speedy trial.
But not really. I mean, it's 5 months.
I guess for your normal person, it's not that
It's
speedy.
not that
Yeah.
speedy. You know, Trump is always complaining, you know, I'm being singled out, I'm being treated badly. He is treated so much better than any normal defendant. Just
True.
take the national security case. They gave him a year and a half, literally, to return those documents, right?
Right.
They wouldn't do that with anyone else.
Correct.
Anyone else was found to, you know, be in possession of top secret documents involving military plans and nuclear secrets. You think they diddle for a year and a half? Not a chance.
Good point. No, I totally agree with you. I'm so sick of him crying that he's constantly this victim. It's like he gets probably the best treatment of any human being on earth in the American
No question.
justice system.
And look how long they delayed in bringing these, indictments.
This is an interesting question from Gamer. Out of the 4 criminal cases against Trump so far, how would you rank them in order of most serious to least serious?
Well, there are 3 so far. We haven't gotten the
gotten
Georgia
the
one.
4th, but let's.
It's pretty easy.
Let's say
Yeah.
it comes. Okay.
Yeah. Number 1 by far is the January 6th case brought today, because that goes to the heart of an attempt to destroy our democracy. And if Donald Trump is not held accountable, then the future of democracy in America is in jeopardy, and the future of democracy around the world is in jeopardy, because you'd lose the leadership of the United States. You know, we take democracy for granted, and democracy is very precious, but it also, like all precious things, can be destroyed. The first golden age of democracy is very recent, was in the early 20th century after World War I, when there were about 24 democracies. By the middle of the 1940s, that number was cut by more than half. More than half of the world democracies were destroyed. So you cannot take democracy for granted. That is by far the most serious. Second most serious is the national security case. Again, it's not a documents case. It's a case involving Donald Trump undermining our national security by stealing these documents, mishandling them, and showing them to persons without clearance. And let me say this. We don't know whether he showed them to foreign powers or sold them or not. Doesn't matter. The intelligence community has to assume that our national security has been compromised, that those documents have not been secure, and bad foreign actors have gotten access to them. They have to assume that. Otherwise, they're putting our entire intelligence at risk, putting the lives of our operatives at risk. Third is the Georgia indictment, which we haven't seen yet, but is going to be similar, I think, to the January 6th indictment, but focused on events in Georgia. And last is the New York indictment for paying hush money and falsifying business records.
There's your official ranking, folks. The
Right.
Allan Lichtman ranking of Trump.
Written in stone.
Written in stone, the Allan Lichtman ranking. David Albine asks, and I don't know if you want to make this prediction or not. It's up to you. Does Trump go to jail?
Yes.
That's an official prediction?
Prediction. He goes, unless there's one scenario where he doesn't, and that's the Spiro-Agnew deal. Do you know about the Spiro-Agnew deal?
I do not.
You know
no.
who Spiro-Agnew was?
I do know who Spiro Agnew was.
Richard
yes.
Nixon's vice president, who was found guilty, was found to have committed crimes. Not part of Watergate, but he was governor of our state, Sam, Maryland.
Yes, I know
and
that.
you know what he did as governor?
No.
He took bribes and kickbacks
right,
the old-fashioned way in shopping bags full of $100 bills.
Gotta love that.
Yeah, love it. And there are some say he kept getting it as vice president, but we don't know that. But we do know he took bribes and kickbacks as governor of Maryland. Richard Nixon's attorney general was a terrific, honest guy, Elliot Richardson, and he had Agnew dead to rights and could have put him away for many years. But they reached a deal where Agnew would admit to one count of tax evasion, get probation, but agree to disappear from politics. And indeed he did, and was never heard from again. So maybe Trump can, if he wanted to, could broker a similar deal. The problem is he's dealing with 4 separate indictments in 3 different venues,
Right.
Georgia, New York State.
You would have to get a deal
and
in each.
have to get a
And
combined deal, and I'm not sure how you would do that.
Granted, he's guilty in all those. We don't
Yeah.
know. Or if he's convicted
Well,
in all
he
those.
would do that before he was convicted. Agnew never went
Right.
to trial.
Right.
He
Assuming
just pled
it's
guilty.
Right.
Actually, no low contendere, no contest. The fancy way of pleading guilty.
Is that? Do you think that's possible in all 4 trials?
I think it's
that he can get out of each one of them?
conceivable, but very, very difficult, particularly since they're all taking place at different times.
Yeah.
Agnew, had, just the DOJ charges facing him.
But you're still saying your prediction is he does end up in jail. He doesn't get one of these deals. He ends up in jail.
Yeah, but it's not a firm prediction. I think, there is enough wiggle room that he might get one of these deals. And, he might get home confinement. That's another possibility, which would be just as bad for him. Because he, I guess Mar-a-Lago is a nice place, but he'd be stuck there. And that would be, in effect, a sentence saying you can't run again because it'd be pretty hard to run from home confinement. That ankle bracelet, might not look too good on camera.
Well, what's worse, an ankle bracelet or a jail cell? I mean,
Ankle bracelet is nowhere near a jail sentence.
right. That's my point.
Even he's going to get sentenced to the farm, where they play ping pong. And
Right,
tennis
right.
He's not going to Colorado Max.
Right. Yes.
All right, 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay. Let's see. Why did it take 3 years to decide that this is a crime?
Good question, and
That
that
is a good
outrages me. This should have been done a year or 2 ago. And, Merrick Garland's an old friend of mine. I've known him since the 60s. I have great admiration for him. He was a phenomenal judge, one of the best judges in America, but just too weak and indecisive as Attorney General. My good friend Bill Maher, I've been on his show and hope to be on it again.
Humble brag.
Humble brag, said it best, Garland diddled for a year and then gave it to someone else. Should not have diddled for that year.
Right. Let's see.
But let me say this.
Yeah.
There's an old saying, the mills of justice grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine.
Beautiful.
Thank you. All right, one more question.
One more question. Let's see. This has got to be a good one. All right, people, start putting your questions in the chat. Your best questions for this man here. Let's see him
Do we have
start
some good
flying.
ones?
I'm trying to give people a chance to put in their best questions. Now there's only one left.
And you'll pick the best one.
And I'll pick the best one. There are people saying they don't think Trump will go to jail. He's got too much money behind him. People are saying he'll end up in house arrest.
Well, he might end up in house arrest.
Yes.
I consider that almost equivalent to jail, but not quite. In some ways, he may be better off in jail. He'll have more freedom in jail than he would stuck in house arrest, particularly since, you go to the low security farm. Which is kind of like a vacation.
Here's a good final question. If Trump runs third party, what does that mean for the third party key?
Well, the third party key normally counts against the White House party, Joe Biden. But when you buy my book, I assume a lot of you bought it already. Those of you who didn't had better. Predicting the Next President, the keys to the White House 2020. As I explain in the book, the one exception to that is in the very rare case, which almost never happens, of a clear split within the opposition party. So if Trump runs as a third party, that would fit the exception of a clear split within the opposition party and would not turn the third party key against Joe Biden. There
you go. All right. We've been going for 40 minutes now. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Final thoughts. Again, this is a big night. Maybe a 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10 out of 10, as we first said.
Right.
Because a 10 out of 10 would be he got convicted.
All
right. So it's a 9 out of 10 breaking news night. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah. Just keep in mind this is by far the most significant indictment in the history of the country. Not because it's unprecedented for a former president to be indicted. He's already been indicted twice, but because this indictment cuts to the heart of the survival of our democracy. Short of treason, you can't be charged with treason, he was not officially at war. What Trump did to undermine our democracy constitutes truly the most serious federal charge ever brought in the history of the country.
All right, folks. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here with the people live on this breaking news night.
Sorry we kind of disabused you of your strategic position with Joe Biden.
I had a position with Joe Biden in the stream, and then I lost it also in the stream.
You had the shortest history ever of a presidential appointment.
Dang. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe. Please click the bell so you know when we're live. If you like the show, if you like the clips, share them with friends, share them online, groups, Facebook, Reddit, whatever that might be to support the show. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.